Hello and welcome to the Polymath PolyCast. Hello and welcome to PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with James Mulvany, the founder of Podcast Co., Radio Co., and Matchmaker.fm. Thank you for joining me on the PolyCast and TeleInnovator. We are here to talk about James' foray into entrepreneurship, what came of that at this time in his life, and where he sees the future taking him and his companies. So thank you, James, for being on the show.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
What is your kind of plan for these 30 days of podcasts?
Yeah, so I'm embarking on quite a mission at the moment to book myself on 30 podcasts within 30 days. I'm about 6 or 7 in now. So I think this is the second podcast I've done today. Wow. So yeah, it's been good fun. And you know what? I'm trying to make every single conversation I have slightly unique versus just sort of repeating the same stuff again and again. Mm-hmm. And also it's a really good experience. I've met so many interesting people already. So but it's pretty full on. I don't know if I'd recommend trying to do 30 within 30 days to everyone. Yeah,
seems kind of brutal in a way, but it also seems very smart in the whole content creation idea.
Yeah. I mean, the main benefit of being a guest on other people's podcasts is it will expose you to a much wider audience than you just get with your own podcast. And, also it's just good for networking. I think you meet all kinds of interesting folks.
Yeah. And you never know where that one podcast, like it might even be a smaller podcast like this one here, where we might be 10 years from now. And you being on like one of the first interviews on this podcast might be very good for you in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seeing one of your videos and it's saying something about you being more of an ideas guy. Do you like seeing the big picture?
Yeah, I think one of the things that sort of I kind of resonate with you about your story, the whole question of do you need to go to college? Do you need to spend that money getting a formal education, or can you learn stuff online? I kind of did a bit of both. So when I was very young, when I was sort of 16, 17, I really started out on my kind of entrepreneurial journey. The interesting thing about me is I've never, ever had a job working for anyone. So I've always just made my own way. Obviously things have grown quite significantly since then. Yeah. But I think, as a kind of young kid, just finished school, it's quite easy to sort of nowadays, especially, and this was back in like 2003, 2004. So I think things have moved on significantly since then. But, as a young kid, I was in a position where, I didn't have to go and get a job because I was earning a living online. And the way I did that really was just to start off with, I taught myself some basic skills. So I learned how to design. I learned Photoshop. And from that, I then sort of learned how to build websites. Back then, I was using like Dreamweaver. Oh, yeah. And I kind of had this idea. I was also like interested in going into radio as a broadcaster. But I decided I didn't want to do that. And I sort of started doing work experience in various different radio studios, etc. But, I kind of wanted to serve that market as a kind of technology company. At the time, I didn't know anything at all. I had this idea of what I wanted to do. I didn't really know how to do it. So, I've always been big on ideas and trying to find I think as an entrepreneur, your job is to figure out solutions to, how to kind of fulfill what you're trying to achieve. And if you can't do it yourself, because, back then I didn't have the sort of skills to do that, and over the sort of subsequent years, I learnt to code a little bit, and now I don't write any code at all. So I've kind of gone full circle. Right. But I think that's the job as an entrepreneur, is to try and kind of fill those gaps between. Oh, I've got an idea, but how do I get to that point?
Yeah, I totally get that idea too. Or trying to figure out, where you want to go, but how to get there. That's been a problem I faced as well. So I totally get that mindset. You actually kind of got one of my questions right there. The whole being an entrepreneur at 17, and where do you think that kind of caused you to think like, hey, I want to create these businesses. I want to do this instead of going to get a job?
Well, I mean, I think it was partially my dad's influence. My dad had lots and lots of jobs throughout his life. And he always said to me, the best thing he ever did was to go self-employed. He was a antiques dealer. He's retired now, but, when I was growing up, he gave him a lot of freedom. So he could come, to sort of drop me off at school, and some of the other dads would be commuting to London every day, and they wouldn't be getting back till like late at night doing their corporate careers, so they wouldn't really see their kids that much. Right. So I think he was always very much just like, yeah, it was the best decision I ever made. It wasn't ever like expected of me that I should start a business, but I think it was probably encouraged, maybe subliminally. And so it kind of just I just sort of fell into it very naturally. I think other people obviously I think it's quite a common trend where people will start off in a corporate career. They'll maybe get to like the late 20s, and that's the point they feel like, oh, okay, I don't really want to be working for someone for the rest of my life. Now is the time to go and start a business. And quite often they'll do that, using their sort of industry experience. But then I think the younger you start, you can afford to make mistakes at that young age, and also you don't have the outgoings. When you get to your late 20s, some people have got kids, they've got a mortgage, and then starting a business is suddenly a big scary thing to do.
Yeah. So what made you decide to make both podcast.co and radio.co?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I suppose ultimately I like making money. That's the first and foremost thing. But also aside from that, we had radio.co for a number of years. We launched that in 2015, grew it very successfully, and also grew very quickly. In 2015, the podcast, obviously podcasting's been around for 15 years.
Yeah.
But it's had a massive resurgence, probably like 2017, 2018. So in 2015, it was still this kind of thing that was maybe reserved a little bit for enthusiasts. 2015, again, there wasn't smart speaker technology out there, so the industry changed a lot. We're still doing very well with radio.co, but a couple of years ago, we just thought to ourselves, rather than build this into the existing platform and just limit it to our kind of current user base, customer base, which is quite niche, it made sense to spin it out as a separate business, as a standalone platform.
Right.
And obviously there's quite a few of our existing customers who are using podcast.co and radio.co. But then there's a lot of people, I suppose, like yourself, who are more podcasting, so they really don't have much of an interest in radio.
I actually contacted radio.co because I was interested in a little bit seeing what it might cost, what it might take. So I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile for me to do so. I try to aim for a kind of omni-channel approach.
Yeah.
My kind of foot in the door with radio, that might be kind of cool too. But
I mean, if you've got, especially think with podcasters who have a large backlog of content, if they have, say, 200 episodes, there's no reason why you couldn't take those 200 episodes and just turn them into a radio station.
Yeah.
And you could either have that as a standalone station, just effectively looping that content, or you could use that, in combination with other forms of content as well. It's a different form of communication.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly, at the moment, the stats are, with podcasting and if you look at listener levels on radio and listener levels on podcasting, because everyone's at home, we're seeing kind of at peak times 3 times the normal traffic we'd get across the board on radio.co than we would, say in January or February. So sort of ever since March, we've seen this huge increase in traffic. Whereas with podcasting, it's remained the same, perhaps because people aren't commuting as much.
Yeah. Well, and I remember listening to podcasts on the walk, that kind of thing, but I don't listen to podcasts so much at home. If I want to listen to a podcast, I'll go on a walk. I'll deliberately go on a walk, kind of thing. Yeah. So I had a quick question for you. What is the origin of the wave streaming name?
Wave streaming. So yeah, that was the first ever business that I launched. Really, the first proper success I had, and I started that when I was 16 or 17, when I was still just finishing sort of sixth form, so kind of like high school. And the name, well, I was thinking, right, radio waves. Mm-hmm. That's how traditional radio is broadcast, via waves over the air. And streaming, which is obviously the term. Back then you said streaming to people and they didn't know what it was. Now everyone knows what the term means. So really, that's how the name came about. That's
cool. I didn't realize that was your first foray. I saw that in your video. I was like, oh, that's really cool. Is that kind of what led into radio.co?
Yeah, wave streaming, is more of a B2B service. So our target market was traditionally what you imagine radio stations would be. And we were relying on someone else's technology. We had for a period of time, we had a deal with AOL, who had a platform called Shoutcast, which was kind of the core of our system. We kind of innovated and built tools around that. And that was actually part of Winamp. I don't know if you remember Winamp. Yeah. Used to be like an old school media player. So AOL approached us. We worked with them for a couple of years. That was when things started sort of really taking off for me. That was probably back in 2011, 2012. And, AOL then sold that part of the business to another company and decided they wanted to break that relationship off with us. So at that stage, radio.co came around. I thought, right, how can we do better and what can we innovate and how can we kind of improve what we're doing now?
It was almost like a spur to action, so to speak.
Absolutely, it was. It was kind of one of those the deal that we had with AOL definitely changed my life. It went from being me, and a couple of staff to sort of being, quite a successful business in quite a short space of time, which was really exciting, because I was 22 years old at that point, 23, something like that. So, it was life changing. But as I say, I knew it was not going to last forever. I think it lasted like 2-3 years. So then, as you say, it forces you to think, kind of, you're outside your comfort zone all of a sudden. You're thinking, right, what's next? And that's a big question for a lot of entrepreneurs, I think.
Yeah, thinking about the future is kind of almost a habitual thing. So some people constantly in the future, some people are constantly in the past, and it's important to kind of bridge those into the present kind of mindset. But I think that as an entrepreneur, we have to kind of be more future focused, even if we need to be present. Where do you see voice field, so radio and podcast and like even smart speakers even, in the future?
Yeah, interesting question. I think the thing with radio is, I don't know, back in the 70s and 80s, they were like, oh, video is going to kill the radio star, right? So everyone's saying that TV is going to overtake, and it didn't. Radio has remained prominent. It's interesting that, as I said before, we're seeing more listening to radio right now, given that everyone's on lockdown, than we have ever before. And I think that just shows that there's something about the medium as a whole, which is kind of like, it's going to be here to stay. What I really like about smart speakers is it's made radio stations really easy to tune into, and everyone's got one in the kitchen now. Some people have got them, like I've got one on my desk here. I've got one in the kitchen. I've even got one in my bathroom. So, I have them all over the flat, and I can tune in to radio stations wherever I want. It's very easy to listen to your radio station via a smart speaker. The problem is discovering podcasts through smart speakers isn't quite there yet. And it can be very, very intermittent, especially because quite often podcasts have got a lot longer names than radio stations. So, I think voice search, and certainly I find myself using it for all sorts of stuff, setting timers. I'm not quite using it for like, what's my day look like type stuff yet. But I think, it's going to get better over time. And certainly, it's amazing because these companies have invented this device that sits in everybody's house now, which didn't exist 5 years ago.
Right.
Well, in a short space of time. Yeah. And
you actually were mentioning something about the search. One thing I've been hearing about that's not been talked about very much is audio SEO. So getting that search engine optimization through audio, and I'm wondering how that might develop.
Well, I think it was interesting. The conversation I was having earlier today on one of my live streams called Working Lunch, which I do every Wednesday. And today I was chatting to a guy he has an audio production company. And he was saying part of the problem with podcasting is still really discoverability. So even when you're trying to find a podcast on, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it's not that easy to discover new podcasts. Unless you know what you're looking for, the experience is not great. Now, I think it was today or yesterday, Google have just announced that they've, for podcasters, they've opened up their podcast manager, which is great because it gives you more insights and more control into, what's going on.
Oh, cool.
And I think Google as a company is probably the one business that have the opportunity to change that discoverability factor. And, they've said that they want to start putting podcasts more in organic search listings. So Google are transcribing using AI all of the podcasts that are in their directory. Now, the idea is, you should not just be searching for the name of a podcast, but it should kind of be grabbing a context as to what that podcast is actually about. And as I say, I think they've got the technology and the sort of infrastructure to actually back this up. So I'm hoping Google can be a game changer, but certainly at the moment, Apple and Spotify are definitely the kind of two market leaders. So we'll have to see what changes there. But I think, Google are the ones to watch out for.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those things too, where they already have the audio transcription from YouTube. I'm sure it's not that much different for the actual act of making podcast transcriptions.
Yeah, but if you think about it, on YouTube, when you search, you generally search still based on what is actually in the description of the episode or within the sort of captions. Or the description in the title rather than the sort of actual caption. So I think that's what's going to make the difference, is being able to show, podcast episodes based on the kind of the contents of them, which will answer questions that people are typing into the search. and just trying to make that experience more native. And supposedly that's what they're supposed to be doing, but we'll have to wait and see. You know what Google's like. You kind of don't know what these companies are working on until they've announced it.
Yeah, well, and Google in particular always starts projects and then ends them prematurely. They have a whole graveyard of stuff.
Oh, they do, yeah.
Actually, perfect example too. I was looking on Spotify the other day. I was wanting to learn a little bit more about email marketing because that's the kind of project I've been working on recently. And I was searching for new podcasts to find something that actually talk about that particular topic. It's a pretty common topic, but I couldn't find anything new. It kept showing me podcasts I'd already seen or just the podcast shows I've already seen. Nothing new really came up. And that was kind of frustrating.
Yeah, so you're sort of saying that, you think maybe it should be looking at, if you've already listened to an episode and it knows that you've already listened to that episode, then why show you that in the search results? Or, you could kind of have it lower down sort of thing.
Yeah. This might be a weird question, but do you ever see radios and podcasts merging? I mean, we kind of talked about that a little bit, but...
I mean, I think they're similar mediums. And... podcasting is, I suppose it's a bit of an evolution of what radio is, right? The benefit of podcasting is it's much more accessible to a wider demographic in terms of anyone's producing a podcast. The barriers to entry are very low nowadays. Anyone can create a podcast. It's very simple to do. And also, I think consumers have a trust of podcasts that has been sort of blown in terms of, people don't trust what they read on the news or what they hear on TV or what they hear on the radio anymore. But because podcasts are produced by people for people, I think there's more of a bond there.
Yeah, like intimacy, so to speak.
Yeah.
I definitely see the same kind of thing. It almost feels like you're with the person there at the same time. Yeah. And on top of that too, it seems like podcasts have a lot more potential at the current moment. But like you said, more people are on radio, so that makes me think about what I need to do about radio too. Podcast.co actually impressed me with your website, by the way. I wanted to let you know that.
Oh, thanks.
I judge companies based off their website quite heavily. And when I was looking at podcast.co as to be my host, I was debating about whether or not I should do it. And then after experiencing the website, I was able to make that decision. And just the way that the contact form came up and the way the design was, it just felt really nice. So as someone who's with podcast.co for life, I want to know, where do you see the tool evolving?
Sure. I mean, one of the things we're working on right now is the private podcasting thing. A lot of corporate clients are turning to podcasting as a tool for internal comms. So engaging, especially if they've got offices that are perhaps distributed all over the place, and especially right now more than ever because people can't travel around. It's a great way of communicating. So the concept of private, introducing private feeds is something that we're working on right this second. Also, implementing more kind of commercial and advertising capabilities. And we'll have to wait and see. I mean, one of the things that's always important to us as a business is to try and keep up with technology and always be innovating. And we have two separate development teams as well on radio.co and podcast.co, so we can make sure that we're always keeping up with kind of technology things as they're changing. So for example, a couple of years ago with radio.co, we introduced Alexa skills because Alexa was allowing that. So, it's really about reacting to a market, I think, and looking at what, number one, what your customers are looking for, and also number two, what capabilities the market is opening up. So, for example, if for example, Alexa or Google have some, new podcasting thing which is tailored to their smart speakers, we'll be on top of that straight away.
Well, good to know. I actually was thinking about asking you about the Alexa skill. I've looked at a lot of your competitors in the space, although I think for you guys, you have kind of almost a niche platform, especially with Matchmaker now being kind of in that whole space too. And so I don't think that you have to really worry about them so much, but I'm just thinking that they had a lot of them that Alexa distribution, and I was wondering how you guys might go into that.
Yeah, well, Alexa distribution at the moment, you can use TuneIn. We submit to TuneIn by default. That's kind of the easiest way I find to discover podcasts and radio stations through Alexa. Again, I think the way Amazon have designed it, it's not always simple to find exactly what you want. And again, even installing skills for consumers can be a little bit confusing, I think.
I tried making my own skill in a couple different ways too, and it was extremely frustrating. And more importantly too, the Amazon customer service was actually very terrible. They were leading into the Echo. So like the actual blueprints for the skill, this customer service for the blueprints were leading to the Echo team. So they had no idea what I was talking about. Now it's just frustrating.
Right.
So yeah, I like seeing where that goes, and I'm excited to be with you guys on the journey.
Cool.
Kind of to one of the more main topics too today, we're talking about self-education. So where do you see that kind of being into play for people's lives?
Well, just as a whole,
Yeah.
I think you know, you can learn anything online right now. We've never been in a position where there's so much information available. You know, even when I compare it to sort of 10 years ago when I was still at university, you know, there wasn't, YouTube had kind of just launched, but really YouTube back then was full of silly videos. There wasn't as much educational content on there as there is now. So, you know, you don't have to spend money. I think if you want to teach yourself a skill, you can pick up, well, you can at least pick up the basics at zero cost. I think the thing you need to watch out for is that, you know, the information you're getting is it from a credible source, because obviously there's lots of fake news going around, and also people who perhaps, you know, aren't really necessarily qualified to talk about stuff. But then I suppose there's arguments to you know, for and against that, isn't there? You know, there's freedom of information. Anyone can publish a video about anything, but you don't necessarily know what that person's saying is going to always be 100% accurate. So, you know, arguably that's a kind of argument for, I suppose, a formal education, because you know for fact what you're going to be learning there is you know, by the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the accountability aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. But then, you know, I suppose, you know, you can learn any skill, and I think, you know, for me, you can never stop learning. There's always new things to be discovering, and also information you learn, you know, goes out of date very quickly. So
yeah,
what, you know, I my degree at uni was interactive multimedia, which is kind of a posh term for like web design, web programming. So I did all that. But the stuff they were teaching me then, like Flash, who remembers Flash now? You know, Flash has been and gone, and it's not something that's you wouldn't have no relevance in that skill. But it kind of like so if you want to keep up to date in your industry, you've got to always keep learning, I think.
Mm-hmm. And you have to do that self-education. That's kind of where I see it, is that like it sounds kind of negative, but what's the point of going to college if the information you're going to learn is outdated? But yeah, like you said, the credibility, the accreditation aspect behind it. So there's that kind of dichotomy, so to speak. One thing that my company or my brand focuses on is self-education as a whole, but specifically the modular degree, which I see almost as an alternative to college, because you're self-curating courses, books, podcasts, any kind of educational media into some kind of consumption rate. So that way you can make a whole plan for your own degree. What do you think about that? Okay.
Well, I think that's certainly an interesting way of looking at it. How do you? So question for you then. How do you kind of curate that? What, you know, if I want to learn about a specific topic, what do you do? Do you just have certain books that you recommend, or?
I want to curate it as more of a framework, so that way people can apply it to any particular niche or topic, and so kind of making it an idea of understanding how you should approach it and how it should be done, not necessarily me saying this is what you should do.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think that's quite an interesting concept. You know, I guess there's probably going to be a change in the way the education system works. I would have thought, you know, given what's going on in the world at the moment, and you know, there's lots of people who are saying, you know, things are going to be changing forever now.
Right.
I think it makes more sense that people are going to be doing, you know, doing different educational courses which are, you know, institutionalized, but doing them remotely. Because actually, when I look back at my learning experience, the main benefit I got from going to university was actually the process of moving away from home and, you know, and sort of socializing with people and like growing up, I suppose, if that makes sense. But so it was much as about life skills as it was actually about what I was sitting in a lecture theatre and learning. When actually now I look at it, you know, I could have quite easily been sat in front of a computer learning that stuff. I didn't really need to be in that lecture theatre.
True. And I mean, that whole networking capacity is very important. I definitely do see the modular degree accounting for that community aspect. So thank you for answering that question. I really wanted to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Started the 30 podcasts in 30 days.
Well, I mean, it's all really to do with Matchmaker. I mean, we launched Matchmaker. We've been treating it as a sort of startup within a startup. So it was a side project. We came up with the kind of concept for it last year, probably about this time last year, April 2019. And we validated the idea initially by just putting a couple of forms on the podcast.co site. You know, one targeted towards podcasters, one targeted towards experts and guests. You know, had a good response rate. So we decided that it made sense to actually turn this into its own platform.
Right.
And yeah, we're 3 months in now, and we've had around 3,000 users signing up, so it's doing phenomenally well. And you know, it's really exciting. What I love as an entrepreneur is actually just the feedback we're getting from people saying, you know, I've signed up and I've managed to get booked on, you know, X number of podcasts within sort of 24 hours.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's amazing. And I've never launched a product like this where we've had as little friction as possible from people who are signing up, because it's completely free to use. I think obviously it helps. But you know, we're really getting lots and lots of people saying thanks, and this is amazing. So yeah, it's quite an exciting place to be. In terms of the challenge, I kind of really want to prove the concept to everyone. So this obviously is probably, as I say, podcast number 8 or 9 out of the 30-day challenge. I'm probably about a week into it now, so you know, got still quite a lot ahead of me, but it's interesting. But I believe it's going to be completely doable.
Yeah, I think so too. The kind of sub question I had here is like, is it the idea of daily content or the way to get people on Matchmaker, which you kind of already answered that. But
yeah, what I'm going to be doing is creating rather than creating a video each day, I'm going to be doing kind of like a 2-part series at the end, which just talks through the process. So if someone wants to replicate these results, you know, here's the sort of behind the scenes look of how we planned and executed the whole thing.
Nice. I actually might check out that, because I kind of like the whole idea of doing that daily challenge, so to speak. I've always had a problem with consistency, and I think having that external factor of like, you have to do it this time frame would be very motivating.
Well, and also it's just giving people a kind of strategy that they can follow, because they, you know, it's easy to appear on podcasts, but if you just appear on them really haphazardly and just do one here and there, yes, you'll get some results. But I think if you kind of have a bit of a plan in place of, you know, which sort of podcast you want to target, how many you're going to be targeting, the time frame in which you want to be appearing on them, all, and kind of like the topics you're going to be covering, you know, it will allow you to be a lot more sort of focused on and achieve better results.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely looked at people's profiles and seen if they were a good match for the Polymath Polycast, and just kind of seeing how it might match. I've had around a dozen people that I've been in contact with on there, and only one of them I've had to necessarily turn down because it just wasn't a good fit. The rest of them all seem pretty excited, and we have about 4 booked out at this point because of that, which I wouldn't have had without Matchmaker. Where do you see Matchmaker evolving?
Well, I mean, the next stage for us, we launched it as a kind of closed ecosystem. So obviously you have to sign up to kind of browse profiles. We want to try and open that up. So we want to make it a lot more shareable. So if someone signs up, they could share their profile. They can maybe embed a better widget onto their website. Say, you know, do you want to book me for your podcast? Because I think that's going to help, you know, with that momentum in terms of making more folks aware of the platform. So the reason we kind of decided to build it as such a closed ecosystem to start with is, you know, no one wants to sign up to a ghost town. And if it was open and, you know, there was only like 10 guests on the site, no one's going to sign up to it, right? So we're at a level now where we feel like, you know, we've got decent quality and decent number of guests and also podcasts. As I say, there's about 3,000 users all in all. You know, within 3 months, I'm really happy with the sort of level of growth. I think the next stage is to try and hit 10,000 users, and I'm pretty sure we'll achieve that within the next 2 months. I mean, yeah, and also there's other things, you know, in future that we could potentially do with the platform. You know, we want to create connections between podcasts and guests right now, but we could even look at, you know, pivoting into connecting podcasters with advertisers. Even maybe look at doing not just podcasters, we can maybe look at Instagram influencers. So there's really all sorts of things that we can, different routes we could go down with this platform. I think it's quite an exciting place to be.
Yeah, definitely. It's almost just adding like another taxonomy to the actual program itself too.
Yeah, sure.
I definitely will look forward to seeing that embedding. I'll put that on my website like as soon as it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should have that in the next couple of months for sure.
Awesome. I almost think about like, what if we had a actual Tinder-like app where you could swipe right or swipe left on people?
So I'll tell you something funny, Dustin. So that was actually part of the when we designed the concept of Matchmaker, we do actually have a UI, like a Tinder-style UI for this, but we never built it. We were kind of thinking of building it, and it was going to be more like a marketing, you know, like a marketing gimmick. Mm-hmm. But you know, we have actually got it mocked up, so maybe one day we'll get that out. Yeah, we'll see.
That's definitely funny. Another thing that I just remembered, you were talking about private RSS feeds on podcast.co. And as someone who has a Patreon, I definitely would like that feature. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that's coming up a lot with podcasters. As I say, a lot of our corporate clients are asking about it for, internal communications podcasts. So, certainly in a pipeline.
Yeah. So just tell me how you've been doing lately. How has your life been, especially during this pandemic?
Good question. Overall pretty good. I'm really lucky. I've got a nice apartment. I've got a good amount of outdoor space, and the weather in the UK, especially in Manchester, it's normally raining. We've actually had pretty good weather since the beginning. There's only been a couple of weeks where it's been a bit overcast and rainy. So, overall, I think my spirits are pretty high. I do miss the team in the office. I think, having that human connection is valuable, and I think as a company, we're having to focus a lot more on communication and making sure that, being more organized about things as well. Like, I think that it's easier in the office to just sort of bounce ideas around,
Yeah.
But, it's still good. And really for us as a business, it was quite a simple transition. We did when the kind of lockdown was coming into effect, we did a day where we sort of tested things out, and then we were back in the following day, and then we decided, that was it then. So we kind of went into isolation mode, probably, I think it was a week or two before it was sort of enforced. But yeah, it's been fine overall. I think generally speaking, we're lucky. We've got a good team, and everyone seems to be pretty happy and motivated.
I wanted to say too, Laura has been super helpful for me this entire process of joining
Great.
So I wanted to mention that.
I'll pass on the feedback. Yeah, sure, she'll appreciate that.
I'm glad you guys were able to pivot very well too. It's one of those things where a technology company like this shouldn't have too many issues, but I've seen some of them do. So I'm glad that you guys were able to feel comfortable at home, do that kind of thing. Has there been any communication problems?
Yeah, I mean, I think there has been a few kind of ups and downs. Nothing too serious, but it's just been, a case of, stuff that, as I say, you're normally just there. Everyone's more aware of what's going on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there has been a few communication issues just here and there, but it's nothing too significant.
I'm curious as to kind of the entrepreneurial aspect, because I'm trying to understand how these businesses are operating during this hard time. Because I'm wondering which companies are going to make it through this hard time, and which ones are going to maybe even get hyper growth from it too.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, with Radio.co, we've seen a lot of growth in this time. We have a lot of new customers sign up, and March and April were very, very good months for us financially. Podcast.co, we were also, doing fine. So I think, we're lucky because these kind of industries are not entertainments. I suppose you class kind of the end product of what these two services provide as kind of entertainment, wouldn't you? So the entertainment industry as a whole seems to be benefiting.
Yeah.
A lot of people are signing up for Netflix, and also communications as well. More people are signing up for Zoom and tools like that. So podcasting and radio, I think they sort of fit between those two sort of sectors. I think the ones that are really in trouble are sort of things like the travel industry, and obviously hospitality. Bars, restaurants. They seem to really be struggling. So who knows? I think there's going to be some casualties in those industries for sure.
I definitely seen some local places have a hard time. I've been trying to support my local restaurants as much as possible, that kind of thing, but I definitely see it too. As someone who's very experienced, how might you give me advice on how I can be a better host and start being more effective at getting people just more comfortable as a guest?
That's a very good question. I mean, I think you're pretty good overall, but I think the main thing is practice. The more people you can speak to, the better you become at sort of judging different personalities and also asking questions. And I think the main thing as well is being proactive about the questions you're asking. So trying to ask questions based on the answers, being an active listener, I think is really important.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the compliment. Thank you for the advice. I've always been a talkative person, so active listening has been a difficult thing for me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but that's that kind of, I think, makes the difference between a good interview. Sure, you can have a set list of questions that you're going to ask, but then actually asking some additional questions on top of them. That's kind of based on what someone's saying and leading the conversation that way. That makes a difference sometimes between kind of a good interview and a great interview, I think. Awesome.
Where might you think about the pre-podcast process? So getting you into the whole system of hey, this is how we do our podcast. Here's the questions. When I got the email from your colleague earlier, I hadn't sent you anything throughout this week, and I felt really bad. I didn't give him any time to prepare, that kind of thing.
I mean, I'm pretty good. I think it varies again. I'm quite comfortable because I've done so many of these interviews, and again, I consider myself quite a good talker, quite a good communicator. So I'm kind of good at answering questions on the spot, even if I've not had a lot of time to think about them. I think as a good practice, it's probably good to try and give people some guidance. But then again, it doesn't matter. Like with this 30 and 30 challenge, because it's just not viable to have 2 conversations with every single person I'm speaking to. Mm-hmm. Even just having sort of 15 minutes before you start recording makes all the difference.
That's one thing I was thinking about today, was about having a little bit more time to chat, but I think that we kind of both were ready to jump right in, and I think we definitely made some great content today already too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been great fun.
One thing I'm really curious about, and I don't know if we touched on too much, is still the future of audio. I think that we could talk a little bit more about that before wrapping up. I really like seeing how voice is evolving, but I'm really curious about podcasts too, and just seeing how I can get ahead as a podcaster.
I think the main things that you can be doing to get ahead is making sure that you're consistent, like I said before, and I think release according to a specific schedule. You don't necessarily need to commit to doing 365 episodes a year, mm-hmm. or even 52 episodes a year, but like saying, I do my podcast in eight episode sort of seasons. I'll have a couple of months break and then I'll come back to it. So but release, when you're releasing, just making sure you're doing it. If you're going to do once every week, make sure you do it once every week. The other things you can do to get ahead, just make sure you're cross-purposing content as much as possible. So turn your podcast into written articles. Make sure you take the juicy bits out and post them up on social media. Mm-hmm. And also, try and, if you're recording video, as we are, using clips on Instagram, using clips on Facebook, LinkedIn. Just think about it as kind of not just the audio recording, but you've got this whole ecosystem to support it.
Yeah, definitely. I love the concept of repurposing content.
Yeah,
and that's one reason I'm doing the video, so I can put it on YouTube, Facebook, and IGTV, at least down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's exactly, that's the way to do it. And I think whether or not you're going to get ahead, I mean, I think certainly that's more than some podcasters are doing. So I think that's probably the best way to start. Once you've kind of established yourself, if you want to be clever with stuff, you can sometimes start spending a bit of money on advertising as well. Use that to drive additional traffic, and also as well, remember to try and collect email addresses. I think a lot of podcasters miss this, but in marketing, it's really, really important to start building a mailing list. Create bonus content that people have to subscribe for, even if it's free to begin with, and then potentially have even more bonus content. As you said before, for patron supporters, mm-hmm. Or people who are on a membership system or whatever. But yeah, I think if building an email list is important, because then you ultimately, when a new episode's out, you can email people as well.
Yeah, definitely. And like I was saying at the beginning, like that's kind of what I've been working on the past few days, is getting that set back up. I had to switch from a different provider, so it's been a whole process. But yeah, you know any secret ways of repurposing a podcast, something that like people haven't thought of yet?
No, not really. Well, I mean, like as I said earlier, why don't you turn it into a radio station? Have a 24-hour stream of your back catalogue. That's something that we've seen a few people do, but not lots.
I only have about 42 episodes at the current moment, so I'll have to get my catalog a little bit higher up. But
yeah,
definitely. And you were talking too about kind of making an email list. It kind of made me think about CRMs. Having I have a personal little CRM just for my podcast guests, and that way I can reach out to them after a certain amount of time. That kind of thing. That's
a good organized way of doing it. Very organized. Another idea that's just come to mind is, potentially you could always stream a podcast live on a platform. Facebook and YouTube have these premiere features where you can kind of set a video to go live at a specific time and host a sort of watch party. So that's something else you could be doing. Potentially before it goes live on the podcast platform, you create an event for each episode. I'm sure there's some podcasters that are probably already doing this, but that's something else you could potentially consider.
Yeah, no, definitely. I actually was wanting to go more into live streaming, but I didn't think about how that might work for me. So that's a really interesting idea. Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Before we wrap up, I just wanted to say thank you for coming on the show, James, and for being such a great guest. And I hope that your 30 podcast campaign goes strong. I mean, we're only about a third of the way done, but I think that you're still probably going super high energy and that kind of thing.
Thanks very much, Dustin. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Now, James, your personal brand SEO is pretty on point, but where can people find you online?
So if you just search for my name, James Mulvany, I have a website now called jamesm.com, so go and check it out. And I'm on LinkedIn, Twitter, etc.
I'll have some links in the description for you. Thank you, James, and thank you, everybody else.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thank you.